focus. This you'll need if you are starting your career focus. If you are in high school or in college, come and hear the skills, the roles and goals you need to know to keep yourself focused. Best believe it, you gon' need it. Career focus. Career focus.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new exciting episode of Career Focus, part of InfluentialFuture. Today as my guest I have Anna Aleksieva. She's a senior machine learning engineer and she will be sharing her expertise, knowledge and know-how and obviously her background, how she became a machine learning engineer. Hi Anna.
Hello. Hi Alex, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise with us.
Thanks for having me on the pod.
So let's get into it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a machine learning engineer. My background is in computer science, and then I specialized in machine learning quite a few years ago now. And then my journey took me through big companies. Then I went to startups, very small startups. And now I'm currently working for what's already not a startup, Monzo. For people that are not in the UK, this is a digital bank that operates in UK and US at the moment. Yeah, that's me.
Excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about your education? So how did you get involved in machine learning, computer sciences? Was it a conscious choice or was it, I like mathematics and I want to get into something more practical?
I would say it was a semi-conscious choice. It was definitely the latter. I like mathematics and I want to find something that is related to that, but it's also applied. I would say I was quite hesitant when it came to kind of choosing a career and going to university. I was not sure whether I want to go into computer science or medicine. So maybe 9 months before that, I was still like, kind of, which one should I go for? And eventually I thought, okay, one of the things that I enjoyed when I was in school was mathematics. I was going to competitions between 11 and 14. And it was not just in school, it was like kind of a hobby. And I decided to go down this path. And also a lot of my friends were going to the UK to study at the time. I didn't go to the same university as actually any of them, but it definitely had an impact to make me choose to move abroad and go to university in the UK.
That's very interesting. So would you say that your hobby made you choose your career, or would that be accurate to say?
Sorry, say it again.
Would it be accurate to say that your hobby, because obviously you mentioned that mathematics was kind of your hobby, helped you choose your career in a way?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it because as I said, I was doing I was going to competitions when I was 11 and 14, between 11 and 14. And then I went into high school and I had like my time when I wanted to spend more time with friends, and I stopped going to competitions, like stopped doing that much maths. But then when I had to make a decision and I was thinking, what did I enjoy the most out of everything I've done? It was mathematics. It was the process of solving different problems, logic puzzles, things like that. I was doing a lot of this with my dad when I was growing up, and I had a lot of fun. And I thought I'll have a lot of fun if I go into computer science, and I did. It was looking back on it now, I think it was the right decision.
And obviously it comes in every student's path that they're finishing their education, they're trying to find a job. Did you find that process quite easy or difficult? What was your experience?
You mean after I finished university?
Yes.
Yeah, so when I first applied to university, I applied for the standard 3-year course, which was you do like 3 years of studying and then you finish and you look for a job. And during my first year, actually the University of Manchester, they were offering a program where they're doing a sandwich year or a placement year. So after your second year, you go into industrial placement. You go work for a year for a company if you find like a company that like offers you a position, and then you go back for your final year and then you find a job. So your course becomes 4 years, and I switched to that when I was in my first year. So in my third year, I went to work for a research unit, which was part of Pfizer. And the idea was that if you already have some work experience, it will be easier to find a job after you finish university. Also, I kind of wanted to, because I wasn't sure before whether I wanted to do computer science and medicine, I thought, okay, I'm going to like go work for a pharmaceutical company and see if it's actually something I'd like to do later after university. And it's like kind of a safer bet because you do it for a year. If you don't like it, maybe you go to a completely different industry and you're not like kind of stuck in an industry that you don't like because you've never experienced before. So I think that helped finding a job afterwards, helped understanding whether it's something that I'd like. I realized I actually don't like it that much, which was good because I only did it for a year. I think I found it easy to find a job after university. I had the kind of an offer maybe 3 or 4 months before I graduated. But again, it was a time when I was not sure, do I go for a graduate scheme? Or I was also thinking of doing a master's. Because when I worked at Pfizer, I realized that I'm more interested in machine learning. Also, some of the courses I did in university made me feel like it's something I want to specialize a bit more into. And I was considering the option of doing a master's in machine learning after graduating. So what happened in practice was actually I graduated. I went working for Thomson Reuters for a year as part of a graduate scheme, and like I'll explain the reason why I did that. And then I spent a year there, and then I went to do masters, and then I ended up working for a few different startups afterwards as a machine learning engineer.
So, what made you do the jump to specialize purely in machine learning? Because obviously when you were studying computer sciences at uni, that's obviously quite vast. It can be anything from front-end software developer, back-end software developer. And to be honest, over the last 10 to 15 years, the field of data science, data engineering has evolved quite a lot. I remember when I first heard the term about data science, it was around 2011, 2012. It was still quite vague. Everybody was saying that science is going to be the profession of the new century. And these days, everybody's talking about machine learning, AI. So how did you decide that this is the field you want to get involved in?
I think when I was applying, even when I was applying for computer science, none of my classmates, that was not a very popular choice. A lot of people, I'm from Bulgaria, a lot of people in Bulgaria were going into law or economics. I think computer science became more popular in like recent years. And as you said, machine learning and data science a bit after that. So when I went into machine learning, I think it was I did my master's in 2016, 2017. And it was just the beginning, I would say, of the kind of boom and the popularity of that degree. And I did it in UCL, and I think the previous year the course was 50 people, and then they realized that there are a lot of applicants, so they did actually 3 separate courses, each 50, so it was like 150. So 3 times the number of people from the year before. Maybe no exact numbers, but something like that, which came with its challenges. So we had a lot of lecture rooms that were really full because a lot of people were interested in like the same courses, like natural language processing, computer vision, and then everyone wanted to pick these options as modules, but there was not enough space in the lecture rooms, so people were literally like sitting on the floor because it was the first year they were running it, and every time we were saying something, they're like, okay, like we're still experimenting, like we were basically the experimental year, and they were improving things like the year after, based on what they've seen when I was doing my master's. But yeah, I think it's become more popular in the last few years, and it's interesting how things took a bit of time to settle in terms of even like job role names. There was a time when one of my first roles after I graduated from my master's was deep learning engineer, and people were like, what is this? Like, what is a deep learning engineer? What's the difference between machine learning engineer, machine learning scientist, and deep learning engineer and a data engineer? There's so many terms out there, and I think like every single company had a slightly different, the definition meant slightly different things, so it was confusing even for people applying for the jobs. If I'm a data engineer here, does it mean I can be a data engineer somewhere else? Or if I'm a machine learning engineer, can I be a machine learning scientist? What does it all mean?
No, I think that's a very accurate assessment. Yeah, I think even these days, the sort of confusion between data scientist, data engineer, machine learning engineer, sometimes I also seen obviously job roles, how they advertise things. It's an amalgamation of a programmer, business analyst, statistics, pipeline. I usually call it the wish list. They want a super candidate who knows everything, or they don't know what they want. Which is usually the latter. They don't know what they want.
There's a bit of that, yeah. I've probably seen a few job postings like this. I think, as I said, I think it took a bit of time to settle in terms of like naming conventions, but it's a bit more clear now, I think.
Yes, and for those of the audience who don't know what the machine learning engineer does, can you give us a bit of an overview what your day-to-day life looks like, and what do you actually find fulfilling in your line of work?
Yeah, sure. I think it depends on I've had a few roles as a machine learning engineer, a few different places, and actually they've looked different from one another. So it could mean researching the latest trends, implementing models. It usually means like that's kind of the core of the job in most of the places. Training different machine learning models to extract patterns from the data, and then being able to predict for new data what the, like, for example, the right label might be, or depending on the type of model you're training actually. Also, it means processing that data, cleaning that data, productionizing your models. In some places, the machine learning engineer will just look into the research part and training of the models, and then the productionizing of the models will be done by software engineers, DevOps. There is ML ops engineers now as well. I think that's probably like one of the newer ones. In my current role, I'm actually quite lucky because we work along the whole spectrum. So we'll be looking at the data, we'll be looking at the training of the model, we'll be productionizing our models, we'll be running A/B experiments with the models, shadow deployments, everything, which was really, it was not something I was doing in the job before that. So it was kind of a nice treat to take something from end to end and see it in production and see how it performs, and you get like a nice sort of gratification at the end of this process. It also means that you kind of onboard into 3 different roles when you start. So you onboard as a machine learning engineer, as a data scientist, and as a backend engineer, and you learn a lot in the process.
So what are the main tools that you normally use in your day-to-day work in terms of languages, tools? Do you follow agile, waterfall logic? in your work, or is it more complicated than that? Because obviously, in my personal experience, people or companies, they say they use Agile Waterfall, but sometimes it's a amalgamation of the two.
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of languages for the ML work, it's mainly Python, and for the backend, it's Go. I don't do that much backend, but if I need to productionize a model, I'll need to do a bit. Then for the data exploration, we use SQL, and like we specifically use like GCP and BigQuery. I don't think we strictly follow neither waterfall or agile. We work in squads with different like backend engineers, designers, mobile engineers, machine learning engineers, and then we do have a kind of weekly plannings and stand-ups, but we don't have sprints in the way like that normally agile is done.
Very interesting. And what would you say are the biggest challenges you face in your work currently? Because obviously, one part is learning the new models that are coming up, because they're currently the last five years there's been explosion in new tools, new models. And then the other thing is obviously you have ChatGPT and other tools coming about, like Google's Gemini, that are coming about as well, which some people are saying could actually revolutionize how people deploy models, how they actually prototype things.
Yeah, I think this has had an impact, specifically in the part that I work in, because I'm in the customer operations part. So it's a lot more like how we deal with customers, understanding their problems, being able to address those issues in an adequate way. As you mentioned, like I think some of the challenges are just keeping up to date with what's going on. I feel like it used to be a bit easier. The field moves at a lot of a faster pace right now, and it just challenging and hard to know that everything that's happened, everything that's new, all the models that have been trained, like all the fine tuning, like different ways to fine tune LLMs. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. It's something else I was thinking about. I think the other challenge, which is separate to the newest trends, is I'm thinking a lot about, okay, if we use some of the newest models, the newest technologies, how do you productionize this in a way that's safe? And I know that companies like Google and OpenAI are already doing a lot of work on this. There have been some not very nice stories about this in the press recently as well. But if you're working so I'm working for a bank, it's a regulated institution. You need to be even more sure that what you deploy is going to be safe to the customers and safe to the company's reputation. So it kind of goes both ways. And if for like any other company that's not regulated, it's a bit easier to make the case of, okay, we're going to deploy something that's going to be AI and is going to talk to customers, and maybe it hallucinates every now and then, and it says something that it shouldn't say. If it's a bank, you're a lot more careful and sensitive about this.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Obviously, technology companies, they have less rules and regulations, and that's why a lot of the innovation is coming from them. Obviously, within financial services in general, there's a lot more, I would say, regulation, scope, what you're actually allowed to do with the data, how you actually look at the data. BCBS 239 is a very important piece of work. Most people outside of finance don't know this, but I'll give a brief overview. It's about how you deal with data, who owns the data. It came about after Basel III, and that's why a lot of financial companies had to decide and put a lot of regulation internally and compliance as well on how to deal with data. Where do you see technology moving in the next 10 to 15 years, given the recent developments of the last 2 years? Do you feel that people are saying that now everybody can become a programmer, everybody can become an expert in the field of programming? Do you feel this is becoming more or less true?
Yeah, I don't know about the next 10 years. I think there's a few things I've seen as trends in the last years when things like ChatGPT came along. I think the field is getting a bit more democratized. So when I was getting into machine learning, people definitely had to have masters, if not a PhD, to get a role. If you wanted a bit more research role, you probably need a PhD. It's probably still the case now, but equally, it could be someone toying around with different models, fine-tuning or building different systems, and they could have equally good results as someone who spent like the last 3 or 4 years studying activation functions, which I don't know if it's like fair or not fair, but I think that's how the field moves faster, because a lot of people are experimenting with a lot of different things. And I think it's a lot easier to get into this. Another newer-ish job title is prompt engineer, right? And that's something I think is definitely getting speed in the last year. Another thing, whether it's easier to become a programmer, I think it's easier for junior people or for people that are relatively new in the industry to become better programmers faster. So you can, if you want to, like, you can get the experience much easier and faster by using some of these tools. So someone that's like senior and like let's pretend that we're in a computer game, but you have like 10x level or something, and then someone junior is like on first level. When they're using like these tools, I think they can get a lot faster to the 10th level.
That's a very interesting characterization. I agree with you that it's quite difficult to pinpoint where the technology is going to take us in the next 10, 15 years. I don't think anybody can say that for certainty. From my personal experience, because I always use some of these tools in my work life and personal life as well, it does allow you to better prototype solutions. It does allow you to get better ideas compared to just Googling stuff. I think it also is very easy for you to prompt it because it's text format. You don't have to be a programmer to prompt something. Then it can give you something in a programming language, whatever you want. I do see that there's also challenges how this is being used and how the data is being trained, because everybody who has some experience with machine learning models and LLM models knows that it's also how the data is being trained, because over time, depending on the people who are doing the prompts and how this is being calibrated, it can actually rot over time. But obviously with new technology, there's always, it takes time for it to adapt and how best to use it. So I think this is one of those cases where we're still in the early stage to see how this technology is gonna change people's work life, but also how it's gonna impact junior people and how they actually use it on a day-to-day basis. Because nobody wants to start putting company data on on ChatGPT, because for example, that's a big no-no. So how best to utilize it in a certain scape. Obviously, Microsoft has launched Copilot for that effort, but there's other tools coming about which potentially could even change that scope as well.
For sure, yeah. I think one thing I would add to this is you still need to understand what's going on. So if you, for example, need to summarize some text, it's a lot easier to judge whether the summary is what you need or whether it makes sense. If you're going to ChatGPT for help with writing some code, if you yourself don't understand what you're trying to get or how the foundations work, you can get a hallucination of the model that's not not doing what you're expecting it to. And if you don't understand, it can get messy very quickly. And I have seen that, like, for example, with asking about like how do I statistically analyze the results of this experiment, and then you get something which on the surface makes sense. When you start looking into details, it's actually not doing what it needs to, and you might get different results to what you expect.
No, that makes perfect sense. We just have 3 or 4 more questions left in the podcast. So some people said this is the favorite part because they get to learn more about the people who I'm interviewing. So Anna, do you have a favorite book, and why is that your favorite book?
I want to say I have a favorite one. I think I go through periods of reading nonfiction and fiction. There's probably a couple of books that kind of left an impression on me. I read them a few years ago now, and they probably kind of stayed in my mind because I read them one after another. And I think one is an example of what's a good way to do business, and one's an example of very bad way to do business. I'm talking about the good way was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who's the founder of Nike. And he talks a lot about how he started the company, all the challenges and struggles he had during different periods of growing and developing the company, and how things are not always going as you expect them to, but you find inventive ways to find solutions to the problems. I think he had a lot of problems with cash flow at one point, and had to find solutions quite quickly so that the company can survive and keep going. And the other one, which I read it first, so it was This Is How You Don't Do Things, was Bad Blood by it's written by an investigative journalist called I'm not sure if I pronounced his name properly, but John Carreyrou. And it's about the story of I don't know if you've heard about this startup in Silicon Valley, Theranos, with Elizabeth Holmes. There was like a big investigation, well, not so recently anymore, and all the things that they were not supposed to do, and all the lengths they went to cover what they're doing, and the people they blackmailed and bullied into not saying what they're doing. And I think it was like a struggle at the time, even for the journalist, to make them reveal the truth. And eventually the truth came out. So those like kind of a really good parallel, especially when I read them, how one is a good story and the other one is a story that didn't end that well for the right reasons.
I'm actually very familiar with the Shoe Dog. I actually have it in my library. It's also very interesting because it's, I think at the beginning when globalization was happening, and it's also a good overview about how no man is his own castle, because in his book he said that he got a lot of help from people, even people he used to work with, people he was working in collaboration, because even in the book he's saying everybody in your organization can have a great idea, and because he's willing to listen to people within his own organization, how to improve things, that's why he thinks he became very successful, and that's why the company survived, because obviously, like you mentioned, he had many instances where there were a lot of cash flow problems, and he needed help to resolve those. And along the way, I think he learned valuable lessons as well, how to conduct business. I'm not familiar with the second book, but I'm familiar with the subject matter in Theranos. It's very famous. It's actually being studied now in business schools, how not to conduct business. So I think that's a very interesting overview of both of them.
Yeah, I think there was a series as well done on the book's called Bad Blood, and I think the series is called something else, the Dropout, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like your observation about Shoe Dog, how you need people's support to keep going and to build something. And I thought that there was some really funny parts in this book where I think like the first employee, I can't remember the name, was this person who's very, very enthusiastic and kept like writing letters about how to improve things. And the founder, Phil Knight, also the writer of the book, he kept ignoring him, and the guy only got even more enthusiastic about it, which I thought was really funny.
No, I mean, you always need somebody who has good ideas. It doesn't mean that all ideas are going to be implemented or all ideas are good, but at least I think they should be considered. And obviously, because you work in technology, I know that you use a lot of different apps, but do you have a favorite apps outside of work, and why are they favorite?
Ooh, let me check my phone to see what I'm using. So I'm definitely guilty being on social media. I think my go-to is Instagram. I don't like admitting it, but probably spend more time than I like today. Spotify, I think another one. I use it for music, but also for podcasts. To another one, maybe Reddit. I definitely end up going down like rabbit holes, usually around traveling on Reddit, people posting about different travels they've done or places they're planning to go to or they've been to. Yeah, I think maybe those three. Because we live in the UK, I think also the weather app. I'm always like, what's the weather today?
I know, I think that's one of the most favorite things for people to talk about here in the UK. What's the weather like?
Yeah, it's true.
So, 2 or 3 more questions. So what do you see in the next 10 years? Because obviously you've been working for almost a decade now. You've been in very senior roles in machine learning. How do you see yourself developing in the next 10 years? Do you still want to be a pure machine learning engineer, or is your thinking evolving and you think that there's something else you want to do potentially at some point in time?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think like 10 years is quite a long term to plan for. I tend to plan for a bit of like kind of shorter periods and look back and try to see if there's anything I want to change. One thing I do know is I like building things. That's something that gives me joy. I probably like to keep on being hands-on, whether that's more on the site or as a main thing. I'm not decided yet. I'm toying with like a few different ideas. One thing as I said, I think I do like kind of shorter term planning. So one thing I've been doing in the last few years, and it has helped me, maybe it will help other people as well, is usually at the beginning of the year, I'll set kind of goals in different areas. So be professional, it will be health, it will be hobby or like different part-time skills I want to develop. And then it doesn't mean that these goals can't change. I probably like sometimes change them over the year, but it gives me a good kind of idea of what I want to aim to have done by the end of the year. And if I haven't done it, why did this happen? And then I repeat the process next year. And I found that quite useful for me. One of the kind of ideas I've been toying with is maybe at some point I'll probably try to build something myself and start something myself. I do like where I am now, so it's not maybe an immediate step, but it's something that's been on my mind in the last few years, I would say. And I was kind of joking about it, but as I mentioned earlier, my path kind of went from working for quite big companies like Pfizer and Thomson Reuters, and then I was working for one startup that it's called Chatmail. When I started with 10 people, when I left with 30. I think like they've grown even more now. That's a few years ago. Then I kept going smaller. The next one I went to was 3 or 4 people. And at the time, it's like, okay, the next one I go to is going to be just me, maybe. And I start something. And then the pandemic started, and I wasn't sure where I want to go next. And I thought Monzo made a lot of sense at the time as a brand, because I like the brand, but also as a place where I can learn a lot if I want in the future to make the step to start something myself.
No, I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, at some point, maybe potentially, I've heard that from a lot of people, they want to do something more interesting. I think the pandemic brought a lot of challenges for many people. I even had friends who were doing MBA programs and everything shifted online, which is not great when you're paying thousands and thousands of pounds to study in a potentially very vital networking program. And I think it's a common theme I'm seeing across young people such as us that we're very optimistic. We want to try new things, and we're not bound by any predisposition. Large, small companies, yes, I think large companies have a lot of job security, but they're also severely lacking in terms of innovation and new technologies. And obviously, in a startup environment, you get to experiment with a lot of new things and new technologies because simply because they have to. They have to use the best tools available and to build something scalable in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and just to add to this, I think like larger companies, if you go from one to another, maybe the industries will be different, but they will be more similar to each other than if you go to a small company where not just the size of the company, but what they're doing will be very, and how they're working will be very different just because it's evolving as the company is evolving, whereas like large companies have already like kind of settled a bit. And I've definitely experienced that with Monzo and with some of the other companies I've worked for. When I started, we were very small data team. Everyone like kind of still knew each other. Now it's very much like kind of there's new people starting all the time, and you don't know what everyone else, like is working on. If you take that like a notch smaller, in a larger company as an engineer, sometimes like you never have contact with, for example, marketing people. When you're working in a startup, the marketing person is sitting behind you, and that's like all of the marketing in this company. So everyone knows everybody, and you work with everybody, and you get like a better idea of what their challenges are and how you can help them with what they're doing, what you're doing.
No, I think that's a very accurate assessment. Sometimes people can get bogged down in silos, especially in large companies, and I think that's not a very good business practice because when you have collaboration with different teams, this is how new products come about, new processes, innovation comes about, and I think this is where big companies are at a disadvantage because some of them are too rigid, very defined. There's not a lot of interaction between teams, and much smaller to mid-sized companies. That's not the case because people know each other, they meet together, they collaborate on different things, and I think that's the best way forward. That is my view.
Yeah, for sure.
And for my final question, if you could go back in time and give an advice to your younger self, like when you're 18 years old, when you're starting out university, finishing high school, what advice would that be?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll probably say don't worry about the things you can't control or you can't change. And sometimes I need to give this advice to myself now as well. I think maybe not just me, but people sometimes overthink about things that can happen or might happen in the future, or things that have happened, and you're like, oh, I wish this didn't go like that. And I'll probably say to myself too, everything's gonna happen for a good everything that happens for a good reason, and believe in yourself and keep going, and you'll get where you need to be.
Yeah, I think that's a very good advice because when you're young, you have to be persistent. I think a lot of young people these days are thinking, am I doing the right degree? Am I doing the right course? Am I doing the right internship? And after a certain point in time, it's more about how you position yourself in the market and how you deploy your skills in the best way. And I think the most successful people I've met is the ones that are very persistent. It's not about what you know, it's how you apply yourself and how you actually if you're actually willing to learn constantly. I think that's a very good skill to have as well. And I think this is the right approach to take.
Yeah, and nothing is final. If you choose something that is not the right fit for you, it doesn't mean you can't change it at a later point in time. And it's up to you. You can you have as much control in this situation as you want to have.
Perfect. I think that's a very good advice, and I would like to, on this note, thank Anna for taking the time to participate in the podcast, and thank you again for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Great chatting to you.
Great. Thank you. And on this note, I would like to thank our listeners, and I hope to catch you in our next episode. Thank you.